Okay, Madam Coordinator, is it okay if I continue on with the meeting?
Yes, you have a quorum, Chair. We're still waiting for Councillor Luloff and Al Shantiri to join, but you do have quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you very much for all your hard work, Kelly. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of the Transportation Committee. Before we proceed, I'd like to do a quick roll call of the 9 members. And I'll remind everyone we need a minimum of 5 members are present to actually have quorum. So on this, Councillor Luloff, we'll wait for him. Councillor Dudas.
Here.
Councillor El Shantiri. Councillor Fleury.
Bonjour.
Councillor Menard.
Present.
Councillor Deruze.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
And Vice Chair Leeper.
Here.
And I see that it looks like Eli's trying to call me, so I'm assuming he's trying to get onto the call right now, so he should be on momentarily. As noted in the agenda that was distributed, we'll be participating in this meeting electronically via Zoom. The instructions for the members, public wishing to submit their comments to participate as a delegation in this meeting were included in the agenda. Those who did not participate in the meeting can also watch the stream live on the city's YouTube channel. For those that are participating in the meeting, I'd ask you to keep your microphones on mute until we call upon you to speak. I'll provide each member of the committee with the opportunity to ask questions or comments in due course. Committee members will be called on first, followed by other members who have joined the meeting. At this point, if you want to speak, I think we all know this by now, use the raised hand feature on the Zoom function. Committee coordinator will also be watching for those cues, and the usual 5 minutes talk times will be applied. So we do not have any regrets at this time, no declarations of interest. Confirmation of the minutes, June 3rd, 2020. Is that, are those received?
Received.
Received.
Thanks, Jeff. Communications, we actually have standards for sidewalk styles, and I'll ask the coordinator, Councillor Fleury wishes to move a motion to put this actually onto the agenda. Would this be the appropriate time for him to read that motion?
Yes.
Great. Councillor Fleury, did you want to read that motion?
Mr. Chair, I'm glad to read a motion, but I don't have it in front of me right now. I wonder if it could be put on the screen.
I'll just take 1 second.
Yes,
Sure.
please.
Sorry about that.
No.
I don't have the Zoom coordinator. Okay.
So be it resolved that pursuant to section 89.3 of the procedural bylaw, Transportation Committee approved the response to inquiry TRC 0220 standard for sidewalk styles be added to the agenda for consideration at today's meeting.
Okay, that is wonderful. On that motion, is that carried?
Carried.
Wonderful, thank you.
Carried.
And then, of course, we also have a response on infrastructure planning and design process. Is that item received?
Steve?
Thank you. So we'll just go quickly through the agenda. The first one, we do have a presentation on this, Vivi? I'm just having a look here.
Yes, Chair, I do have a presentation.
Yeah, good. So we'll hold that item, and that's the STO transit study for Gatineau's West End integration with Ottawa. Office of the Clerk, status update and Transportation Committee inquires and motions for the period ending the 21st, August 21st, 2020.
Received.
Is that received? Great, thank you. Item number 3, Westboro McClare Park Civic Hospital residential area speed reduction. We all like to see those, and that's in Kitchissippi Ward. I have no presentations, no delegations, and no correspondence. So is this item carried?
Carried.
I have one quick question.
Okay, so we'll hold that item. Is it very quick, Councillor Duda?
It's incredibly quick.
Okay, please go ahead and ask.
I was just curious in respect to the limiting of speed to 30 on Bayswater Avenue between Gladstone and Somerset. I was wondering why staff weren't recommending that the speed limit start at Yonge Street. And I only ask that because as you're heading under the bridge, you're hitting residential homes and there's a natural impact for motorists to start to slow. So I was curious as to the rationale as to why it's not started a little bit early.
I'm assuming, is it Greg taking this one?
Yes, sure. To you, Council, to you, Chair, and Councillor Dudas. The request comes from the councillor of what he would like to see, and we respond to that. If there is a desire to extend it, we can certainly look at that. But if it doesn't meet the conditions of 30, then we'd have to come back to committee.
I don't want to hold this up, and the councillor
Yeah.
knows his area, but I was just
Yeah.
curious because I used to live very close to there, and I thought it was a natural spot to start it at.
We're responding to the resident requests.
And that makes sense. So again, I'll go back to the item unless somebody wants it held. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 4, Old Ottawa South, Old Ottawa East residential area speed reductions. This is in Councillor Menard's area. We have no presentations, delegations, or correspondence. Does anyone need the field to hold this item? If not, is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Great. Item number 5, the installation of safety enhancements on Bank Street Canal Bridge. There is no presentations, but there is 3 delegations, I believe. Is that correct, Kelly?
Yes, there's 3.
Wonderful. So we'll hold that item and come back to it. And then I think that's about it for agenda clearing, unless I'm missing something here. Nope, we're good to go. So I guess we go back to the first item on the agenda, which is the STO transit study for Gatineau's West End integration with Ottawa. And just if you're following along, since we've removed the inquiry or the response back that Councillor Fleury wanted, Kelly, is it appropriate that we put that at the end of the agenda?
Yes.
Wonderful,
You can
thank
do
you. Perfect. So we'll start with item number 1, and I'll turn the floor over to Dee.
Okay. Kelly will be putting up the slide deck. Thank you. Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm really happy to be here to update you on the STO tramway study and its implications for Ottawa. With us are the team leaders from STO, and I'd like to acknowledge that Madame Myriam Nadeau, the chair of STO Board of Directors, is here. Monsieur Marc Rousseau, he's the STO Director General, as well as Monsieur Patrick Leclerc, Director of Planning, Development, and Communications. So they are here to help answer any questions that is very specific to STO. Staff, city staff are also supporting me here with Greg Kent and Pat Scrimger. So for other issues related to Ottawa and the implications of this project on Ottawa, we're here to answer those. Next slide, please. So this project brings a lot of benefits, not only for residents of Gatineau West End, but it improves the transit service for Ottawa residents as well. The project, because it's crossing the river, it is sustainably addressing the current and future commuting demands to 2031. The project aims to reduce bus volumes in the downtown anywhere between 30 to 70%, depending on the solution that is selected at the end of the day. As well, vehicular demand will be decreasing by 15 to 20% during peak periods. I mean, that happens whenever you introduce a new transit project. It supports the principles of our city's climate change master plan, as any electrified transit project would do. And there is also a potential for this project to kickstart other projects that the city has. And I'll get into that later. Thank you. Next slide, please. So This is really a follow-up to the briefing that STO provided to Council in May of 2020. At that briefing, it was noted that the tram and bus technology was recommended, and this was done through previous studies. 2 corridors in Gatineau are needed to serve their transit needs, and out of those 2 corridors, there are 3 variations, 3 options, and that's really based on the technology choice, and I'll get into that later. The crossing at Portage Bridge was determined to be the best crossing. And when the tramway reaches Ottawa, there is only 1 corridor that's needed, but we have 2 options that are being considered. Since the technical briefing, there was a month-long online public consultation event in June to July 19th. And I will get into some of the results of that survey as part of this presentation. And the project is still continuing. It's not done, so we still have a number of technical analyses to work on with the STO and other stakeholders on this project. Next slide, please. So you've seen this before. These are the 3 shortlisted corridors. They were presented at the May technical briefing. So the blue line represents the tram technology. So in option 1, it's all tram along there and then connecting over to Ottawa. The option 2 is a hybrid. Options 2 and 3 are both hybrids, and it just depends on which corridor is selected for the tram. The other corridor would be bus-based. Next slide, please. So the crossing to Ottawa, Portage is selected for this particular project which is aiming to connect commuters from Elmer to the downtown. It has the least number of transfers for passengers, so that is a good thing for customer convenience. And there are choices of transfers to line 1 at 2 stations, Lion and Parliament. It doesn't, for Ottawa riders, we don't, for Ottawa commuters who want to get to Gatineau downtown, transit riders don't need to backtrack because Portage is right there. It brings them right to their destination. There's also the Prince of Wales Bridge was considered, and it's not considered appropriate for this particular project, but it continues to be protected for future transit crossings for a future project. As you can see on the map there, it's too far to the west, and it would cause a number of an additional transfer for passengers heading to either downtowns and backtracking for some, for both. Next slide, please. So these are the 2 main corridor options in Ottawa, although Wellington will have 2 subsets of that, and I can mention that in the next slide. As the tram comes through, it's electric, of course, and it'll be double tracked through this area to protect the visual aesthetics of the Confederation Boulevard. There will be, the tram will be on battery operated, battery power through here, so there won't be any overhead wires along Portage Bridge, as well as any surface segment in Ottawa, which means that there will have to be a recharging station at the end of the line. So for Wellington Street, the surface option on the diagram on the left, there will be 3 stations with 1 ending around Elgin. The stations will have surface access, so it'll be a lot easier for customers to access the stations. Wellington itself, though, it has a very narrow corridor, especially east of Lion. And there are lots of competing needs for this corridor, for car traffic, for pedestrians, for cyclists, and also protecting the view and image of the whole Parliament precinct with the wide l'Esplanade as well. So the impacts of this project would actually be on the north side of the tramway, and I can get into some of the details in the next slide. So I'll skip to the traffic implications. So with squeezing in the tramway, it'll mean that anything east of Lyon, we will have to restrict turning movements, or that there will be no turning lanes provided. And so there are going to be traffic implications from this project onto other downtown streets, and that work is still being assessed at this point. There is potential service disruption if the tramway were to run on Wellington because of things like demonstrations or other special events that tend to block close off Wellington. And again, there could be a visual impact on the corridor, especially at the Elgin station where our National Memorial Monument is there. For the Spark Street option, it's about 1.2 kilometers tunnel below Spark Street. There are 2 stations instead of 3 because the one closer to Elgin, if there were to be a third, is too close to the O'Connor Street station that's identified here. There will be more direct connection to Line 1 in comparison to Wellington because it's 1 block closer and it's underground, and there could be, this project would include the underground connection to our Confederation line stations as well. Of course, anything that is constructed underground would be more complicated and complex construction because of the utilities that are down there. And as a result, the project will be much more expensive than the surface option. But there's also the opportunity, particularly for Spark Street renewal, reanimation of Spark Street. If this project comes in, there will be construction down below, of course, and then construction on the surface for the station accesses, which could be incorporated into buildings. And it provides an opportunity to coordinate the implementation of the Spark Street Public Realm Plan. Next slide, please. This is just a sample layout, a graphic of what it would look like on Wellington with traffic or without traffic. So that would be without traffic east of Bank Street. There'd still be traffic west of Bank Street. The with traffic, the upper diagram shows the vehicle lanes being on the south side, the tramway being on the north, and with cycling facilities there before you get to the sidewalk on the north side. So with this option, and as well as the one below, I had said earlier that there will be restrictions on turning movements. And on the north side, where the Parliament Hill buildings and the judicial precinct is, there are currently 8 access points, and those need to be reconsidered in terms of consolidation, because as you can see from here, anyone wanting to make that turn onto the precincts would have to cross the tramway. So as we consolidate the numbers of accesses, it would improve the safety and the efficiency of the tramway operations. This issue is a very important one, and it's being reviewed by the feds. So we don't have an answer to that just yet. If this is a no-go, it will then impact the feasibility of this option. For the sub-option without traffic, of course, there'd be more space, separation of the from the federal buildings on the south side. There's more room to work with. It can be tight in this area, around 27.5 meters. So it's tight. So by removing removing the vehicular lanes, it gives a little bit more space to add to these elements. And I want to say that this is just a sample layout. It's a given point in the plan. It's not depicting where the stations would be. So the platforms would be much wider and add to this. So it's just giving you a schematic of how the corridor would look. Next option, please. Sorry, next slide. Oh, sorry, I should also mention that in the previous slide, the trade-offs are really compromises design standards and the downstream traffic impacts on Ottawa's downtown streets. Okay, next slide. So regardless of which option, technology option is selected on the Gatineau side, whether it's all tram or hybrid, there will still be buses operating on the City of Ottawa streets. As you can see from the maps below, they would use Portage Bridge and Macdonald-Cartier Bridge. And depending on the selection on the Gatineau side, we can see up to a reduction of 70% of the STO bus volumes with the all-tram solution, and the hybrid would bring it to about 30 to 45% reduction. I'd like to point out, though, as you can see the green loop there, that means buses will be operating with the tram along the section of Wellington up to Bank. Next slide, please. So the consultation took place online over about 4 weeks, and there was a good number of respondents. 570 in Ottawa, close to 900 in Gatineau, and plus a few others in the surrounding municipalities. The general responses were very similar between Ottawa and Gatineau results of the survey. There's a strong majority that want transit to serve both downtowns. 80% of the respondents want the facility to serve both downtowns and connect with the O-train system. 97% want an integrated transit solution that is reliable and resilient. So they're looking for good service here. There is very strong support for the Spark Street tunnel option when first and second and third choices are considered collectively. And that is reflected both in on the Gatineau responses as well as the Ottawa response. And access for motor vehicles is deemed very important or somewhat important by about 36% of Ottawa and 42% of Gatineau respondents. Wellington without traffic was marginally higher than the Wellington with traffic. For Quebec respondents, they ranked equally, and both were also behind the Spark Street option. Most Ottawa respondents wanted fewer STO buses in the downtown, but they also recognized that some STO buses are needed to mitigate the number of transfers. So there's recognition that the service for the passenger and reduction of the transfers would be a better situation. Next slide, please. So the survey also provided a section for written comments. So it's not just selecting options, but here are the summary of some of the comments that came through in that part of the consultation. There was reiteration of strong support for the tunnel option in connection to the Federation line. There was also a number of comments about alternative river crossings, such as Prince of Wales, Chaudière, Alexandra, and even options further to the east. And of course, with the different river crossing options, you have different transfer station options, such as Tunney's, Bayview, Pimicee, the Byward Market, the Rideau Center, and so on. There were some comments about alternative corridor options to investigate, like Albert, Slater, Laurier, and other corridors in Gatineau, and corridors beyond the study area. There were comments that the focus shouldn't just be on the downtown destinations, but other non-downtown federal complexes. There was also concern about the economic impacts to the central business district if vehicle access or lanes are reduced or removed. Of course, the public are also wanting to make sure that any system that is designed, that its capacity can be expanded into the future. So that's longer term thinking. There were a number of comments about the need for this project and the timing of the project, the impact of technology advances and changes to the workplace because of the pandemic that came up. And I have in my report addressed this issue that the project did not, for its needs, did not take into account the pandemic because the timing of the return to downtown offices, workers returning to downtown offices is unknown at this time. And the downtown will always remain an attractive destination in the long term. The need for more efficient transit connections remain, not only for workers, but also for students, tourists, and other people traveling for health and leisure reasons. The project is actually being planned for the long term. So we recognize that there's something happening right now with the pandemic. What are its impacts in the long term? That's still to be determined. But this project is not about the timing per se, but more about how which corridor is best for the project in Gatineau as well as Ottawa. And the pandemic will have an impact, but we feel that it could be limited to when the system will reach its capacity in the future, and perhaps the timing of the start of the project, but I'll leave that to STO and their funding partners to decide on that. There were questions about the financial responsibilities. Who's going to pay for that, who's covering the capital operating, as well as the maintenance and asset management of the facility. And there were questions also, or comments made about safety and design, not just for the tramway, but also for cyclists and pedestrians. And there were also additional comments about addressing growth, general growth planning issues, about sprawl, intensification, and transportation demand management. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, that this project is ongoing. This is just an interim report providing you with an update so far. The point that I had made earlier about the accesses and whether it's viable to consolidate them for the parliamentary and judicial precincts. The traffic impact study is ongoing and being reviewed. Cycling design, particularly in the tight spot near Bank, has to be reviewed because the design right now is some of the elements are substandard there. Property requirements, particularly along the whole stretch. If there's more land, that would be better. But there's also land required around Lion and west of Lion because of all the turning movements and everything that has to fit in there. The decision of all tram versus hybrid will then have an influence on the number of STO buses continuing to operate in Ottawa, and costs still have to be developed. Next slide. So the next steps that we're going to follow is working with STO and other stakeholders such as the NCC, PSPC, and other federal governments, federal departments to complete the analysis, the technical analysis, and look at the plans and how they can be refined. We need to start talking about mitigation options and strategies to reduce the negative impact of any one of these options, confirm the cost, and then that'll allow us to propose recommendations. And then this project will be seeking approval of Transportation Committee, City Council, Gatineau Council, the STO Board, NCC Board as well later in the year. For Ottawa, the plan is sometime around November that we would be, the plan is November TRC is when we would be bringing the report back to committee. And the link below also links up to the STO website, and the public have the opportunity to continue to add, submit comments to this project. So there's still a lot of time here for the public to be engaged in this project. And I think the next slide, that's it. So I'm ready for questions. Thank you.
First of all, Vivi, thank you. It's kind of weird dealing with something that is coming from the other side of the river that could be coming into our neighborhood. And I know there's plenty of questions, but we can see progress on this. Since we have no delegations, I'm just going to go right directly to questions from councillors. We have Councillor Fleury, Dudas, and Luloff up. So Councillor Fleury, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a bunch of questions, as you can see, per my comments in the report. I'll get back to them, and I want to thank Vivi for responding to those ahead of today's meeting. So I'll get back on the list, but my initial question is a question of procedure. So we have a report that was conducted by the City of Gatineau and STO that is now crossed into our realm. Recognized on the last slide that you are proposing an approval package later in the fall for us. But I want to know, when is the time that Ottawa will form its position? I would have thought that today's report was our opportunity to define additional parameters or additional concerns or opportunities so that Gatineau Council, STO, and their consultants can meaningfully adapt their plan to the City of Ottawa context. So I wonder if you're able to describe why we don't have more of an Ottawa position. Today is an update, I recognize, but why aren't we formalizing a City of Ottawa's position or a council position to participate in the consultation that the City of Gatineau has undertaken?
Through you, Chair. Well, because the technical work has not been finished on the study, so it's very difficult for staff to formulate a position to recommend to committee and council. So the work is continuing, but this is an opportunity for committee members to add comment, provide direction, perhaps even to the study, to city staff, so that we can share that with the STO study team. I mean, they're here as well, so they're listening in, and we'll be able to respond to any suggestion that you may have.
Again, on procedures, so I'm glad that you and Pat are advocates at those tables and participate in the granular sort of element, but I think that the responsibility of either us at Transportation Committee and or Transit Commission is important, and I don't want to have a fait accompli in November when some of the concerns or opportunities that we see might then be dismissed because of the timing or because of a no answer. So I'll get back on the speakers list, but wonder if out of this committee we can form directions that are appropriate and formalize Vivi and Pat's involvement and formalize the City of Ottawa's position on the matter. I think there's some elements that I imagine STO will be happy with. I imagine, for example, as the underground elements are less impactful to our residents, that certainly would be favorable, that an integration to our LRT stations would also be favorable. I imagine there's a lot of points that we should formalize out of this committee that give our team and their team clarity.
Vivi, do you want to respond?
Yes, I think that was a comment that committee can provide direction to help staff. We have to keep in mind that there's also the issue that STO is trying to solve, and that's connecting their western growth, bringing their, which is exceeding 33% is the planned growth, and that how do they move these people, and the direction they want to do that is through transit, moving from the west to the downtowns. So that's the focus of the study. If there are other needs elsewhere, it may be out of scope of the study, but so this is the problem that they're trying to solve, and this is what you're seeing to date is the results of some of the analysis to date, and talking about the 2 corridors in Gatineau, the 1 corridor in Ottawa, crossing at Portage.
So Mr. Chair, I'll be listening to our colleagues and committee members' comments, and maybe we can regroup at the end and decide what's the best approach within the scope in terms of formalizing the City of Ottawa's position. So I'll take myself off the speakers list. I do have questions on the report itself, but just from a procedural point of view, I was confused why we're not formalizing Ottawa's interests in the consultants' reports.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Fleury. We'll get you back later on. We have Councillor Dudas and then Councillor Luloff, and followed by that, Councillor Kavanaugh.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair. I wanted to thank Vivi for this presentation, and I wanted to thank Gatineau and STO for all the work that they've been doing to get to this point, as well as the technical briefing that was provided much earlier. You know, I know that strengthening our relationship with Gatineau in terms of our transit system is a huge advantage, and we should be operating as a national capital region when it comes to our transit systems. I agree with Councillor Fleury when he indicated that it'd be nice to know what the next step in this process is, because there's a lot of elements of this plan that are going to have a significant impact on the City of Ottawa and our residents and our commuters in our transit system. So I think that it would be valuable to know where we go from here in terms of formulating that decision. My question is in respect to the feasibility of the Spark Street underground option. So when I was looking at all the documentation that was provided before this, it's quite clear that the majority of residents who responded to the survey were in favor of that. I know that from my personal perspective, impeding the visual aesthetics of our Parliament Hill is not an option to me. I don't, I know that it probably seems to be the easier choice, but once again, once we impede that visual aspect, we can't get that back. So I'm just curious as to, the cost, if it's something that STO Gatineau is prepared to incur of going underground of the Spark Street option. Is this even a viable option that is being considered because of the impacts of the costs of all the requirements of going underground?
Chair, if I can respond, technically it is feasible to get the tunnel through underneath Spark Street. Of course, it'll be complicated. There are utilities that have to be avoided or relocated, so there is a cost there. As for whether STO is views this as a viable option, I think you're right, Councillor, that cost is a concern. But if I may turn this over to perhaps Madame Nadeau to respond. I'll leave this for her. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. As Mrs. Chi was mentioning, it is obviously the cost is a concern, and we're looking into it. We're refining estimates right now. But at this point in time, it's not a question that I can give an answer to, but it's definitely one component around which we need to address in the long term. And it's also something that this study is to clarify what will be the costs of each option, and then obviously be an input to the recommendation that we'll have to make in going through with this study and this project that we need to transport our residents from our West End to your downtowns and vice versa.
Thank you. I think that we're having this conversation about what this all looks like right now, but if one of the options that is on the table might not be feasible due to cost, then that's not really an option at all. So I think that, to Councillor Fleury's point, understanding the process, what comes next for the City of Ottawa is somewhat essential, because once again, we can't have a fulsome conversation if we don't know if one of the options is actually a viable option. So thank you.
Great, thank you for that. We have Councillor Luloff, and I just noticed some other committee members that have popped on, as Vice Chair Leeper, and then we'll go to Councillor Kavanaugh. Sorry about that, Teresa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So if we decide to go for an option that restricts traffic on Wellington, do we have any initial results for the modeling of what the impact would be on the surrounding streets? So having worked for nearly 10 years on Parliament Hill, Wellington is a pretty high demand street for motorists at the end of the workday, and I can't imagine what forcing all of that traffic onto Queen will do to our rush hour.
Yes, Councillor, that is the big issue about the Wellington option, the narrow right-of-way and all the competing needs in there. And by squeezing in the tramway, we will it will have an impact on traffic, and that's to the degree and whether that can be mitigated. That's still being discussed at the staff level. But it's quite obvious that when you take lanes away, then there will be some impact on other streets. So it's just a matter of can we mitigate the negative impact? Is it an appropriate trade-off? Those are the things that staff will review and then present to you our recommendation, our professional advice on that matter.
Okay, so we have and continue to invest billions in our transit system. And it seems to me that there's not really much of a need for redundant STO vehicles in the downtown core. So are there any discussions about making Bayview the hub where STO customers could simply transfer onto OC Transpo buses?
At Bayview, so they would have to come across the Prince of Wales Bridge then?
Sure.
Okay, so that is not has not been reviewed as far as I know in this study. But I do know that Pat Scrimger and Patrick Leclerc and their teams have ongoing discussions on how to coordinate and improve a transit, interprovincial transit, even without new projects like this. So, but your point has not been part of this, the scope of this study.
It just seems to me that we've invested so much money in a great transit system that currently is functioning quite well with excess capacity, that to layer a second transit system, a second separate transit system on top of it is quite redundant. So trying to get the closest transfer point to the other side and to use that as a hub would be a better option than overlaying two transit systems on top of each other. Just a point. Do we have final say in what kind of construction or work is done in the jurisdiction of the City of Ottawa? If the STO decides to go with a model that doesn't work from our perspective, what recourse do we have as the City of Ottawa?
If it were Wellington, that was selected at the end of the day, of course, staff will be working on behalf of a committee and council before that point, before we have to bring the presentation forward to look at the issues, the impacts for Ottawa. And the NCC would also be looking at this as well as the PSPC. So we will try to mitigate as much of the negative impacts as possible and report to you on the outcome. There will be trade-offs. If it's on Wellington, that's for sure. There won't be, because we just can't fit everything in. And what are those trade-offs? And that's what we will have to review very carefully and then present that information to you at the next reporting.
Okay, fair enough. I just want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position where we solve one problem by creating 5 more. I want to see greater integration between our two systems. Absolutely. There are a lot of people that live, in my ward that travel across the bridge every day to go to work. We have a large bilingual community, and it, makes sense that they would be going to Place de Portage. It absolutely makes sense. But the issue here is, what are we doing to everybody else who's traveling across that bridge that lives in the downtown core, and what are we doing to our traffic the rest of the time? So I'm very concerned that we're solving one problem and creating 5. So I just hope that that's something that we think about throughout this process. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Luloff. And just before we go to Vice Chair Leeper, I just would like to consult with the clerk's office, and Caitlin, I believe you're on. If we were looking to try to form some kind of opinion in today's kind of meeting, would this be the appropriate opportunity, or if you can give us some guidance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the responsibility for taking a formal position on behalf of the City of Ottawa is an authority that would rest with Council. So currently this report is before committee for information. So there would be an opportunity either when a report is before committee for approval to make recommendations to Council, or directly to Council via a notice of motion at any intervening time.
Okay, so Councillor Fleury, you probably heard that. I think there'll be a little time between now and council if you want to look at doing something. Would that be appropriate, Caitlin?
Currently, this report is not scheduled to rise to council for approval. So at any point in time, a member could bring forward through the usual notice of motion process a resolution to take a position on behalf of the city, or were there to be the forthcoming report for approval, it could be done at that time.
Okay. Councillor Fleury?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this on procedure, Caitlin. If this committee chose the important requested that this report go to council, would that give it a window to form a direction?
Mr. Chair, you'll have to excuse me. I was reading the recommendation, but not the routing of the report. This is actually scheduled to go to council for information as well. So yes, there would be opportunity between now and council to formulate something of that nature.
Very good point. Thank you. And thanks for clarifying that. Matt, I'll go to Vice Chair Leeper, Councillor Kavanaugh, and then right back to you.
Thanks, thanks, Chair. I do wonder, and I don't want to start going down a procedural rabbit hole, but Caitlin, if this committee chose to pass a motion today to recommend a position or provide guidance to staff, I believe that would be in order.
Mr. Chair, yes, where a matter is submitted to a standing committee for action that pertains to taking a formal position on behalf of the city or asking another level of government for action, this matter would then be submitted to council for approval under the procedure bylaw.
Perfect. And I'm not sure that we're going to go down that path today, but I do want to understand the drawbacks to the Wellington proposal in a bit more depth, because it sounds like some of them are deal breakers. Where the negative impacts of the Wellington proposal require mitigations, I'm wondering, Vivi, if you can take us through what some of the mitigations being explored are. For example, Councillor Luloff has already brought up moving the traffic into other parts. We also know that there are the driveways on Parliament Hill. There's multiple intersections. Trying to get some sort of a tram capacity down Wellington at peak is going to be extremely challenging. What are we looking at by way of mitigations that would suggest it's premature to make a determination even today that that's not a viable option for us?
Oh, have we lost Vivi?
Oh, I'm sorry. There. So, Councillor, the mitigation could include the ability, if the feds want to give more land, more property, to increase the right of way for this project, so that we can fit in all of the elements with the proper design standards and widths and everything else, because it is very tight in the section east of Bank. The the cycling facility is below standards for design through there. And if there's more land, we could address potentially some improvements, so mitigate some of the traffic concerns, maybe not. So there are these things that have to be explored, but you're absolutely right. I think the accesses onto Parliament Hill, that could be a game changer for this corridor on Wellington. If that has to be maintained, that's a number, 8 access points. That's a lot of potential conflict points for vehicles crossing the tramway and to head onto Parliament Hill, and it disrupts the efficient flow of the tramway. So we're still going through all of these issues right now. So that's for Wellington. For Sparks, there are mitigating measures that have to be taken as well, because at the portal, it affects the pathways that are there now, some of the landscaping. I mean, these things can be engineered into the design. And how do the riders come up to the surface? Where would those access points be with the buildings? So we recognize that there's still some very, very big issues to address. And particularly the viability of one corridor over another. One is about cost, and the other one is about the right-of-way that's available to do what we need to do, particularly space that's needed for the platforms. We're expecting thousands of people to get off the bus or off the tramway at Lyon in the morning, and more boarding, hundreds boarding there as well, to head to Gatineau in the morning. So what do we do there for signal timing? Not just for the space for people to collect, but signal timing to allow pedestrians to cross. And what does that do to the traffic? There is, it is being proposed at around Lyon that there would be an underpass for pedestrians to get onto the south side of Wellington. And this project is also reviewing if that underpass can also connect to the Confederation line further south. So we're not ready yet to identify mitigation measures. For traffic, perhaps there's something we can do with traffic metering on the bridge, so that vehicles coming off the bridge will, they would get lower priority because there is an investment here in transit for the tramway. So those are the things that we have to discuss with the city of Gatineau as well, because that will also affect their transportation network and their planning in that area.
Okay, so what I've heard with respect to the Wellington option is that some of the potential mitigations might be things like providing pedestrian underpasses, working with traffic metering to try to prioritize the transit through that corridor, and then I think stickiest maybe of all is giving a chunk of Parliament Hill's lawn to the project in order to make the right-of-way work, and that's going to be controversial.
Yes.
Like I am sympathetic today to a potential motion that might come out of this committee providing staff with direction that, while we may want to continue looking at how to mitigate some of the impacts of the Wellington corridor, that at least on a preliminary basis, our direction with staff is to focus on or prioritize a Sparks option, recognizing that the hurdle there is going to be cost. But a number of these mitigations, things like building underpasses in order to facilitate pedestrian flow and try to make the right-of-way work, those are not going to be cheap either. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Chair, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Leeper. I'll go on to Councillor Kavanaugh and then Councillor Fleury.
Thank you very much, Chair. As someone who worked on Parliament Hill for almost 30 years, the idea of getting rid of traffic on Wellington is really great. The parliamentary precinct slipped over to the other side of Wellington years ago, despite their efforts to keep it on one side of Wellington. A number of buildings that are part of the precinct are on the opposite side. And there's a lot of back and forth. As someone who was a committee coordinator for years, running around to committees in the different buildings, you're back and forth. I would love to see as much traffic off of Wellington as possible. It always bothered me that our most prized possession in Ottawa was blocked with traffic and buses. And so I would favor moving towards the tunnel eventually, because just to get things off of Wellington altogether, it's a shame. You can't ride your bike in front of Parliament Hill at all. It's impossible. The buses are there. Actually, the biggest hurdle, and no one's talked about that, is the tourist buses. And I don't know, with COVID right now, it's not as a factor, but they're always there, and they're constantly parked along that. And it's a huge hazard. So I don't know how that fits in. But my question is are we looking at that? Have we talked to the, what is the conversation with Parliament on this conversation? Because we know that that's a big part of what they do every day. The idea of tunnels underneath, I always dreamed about that. I don't know if people know, but there's the Central Parliament building, which obviously is not going to be open for a few more years, had tunnels to both East Block and West Block. And so you never had to go outside in the old days. Now, with everything being, buildings being taken over on the opposite side, running back and forth. And it's not that, you know, I'm prioritizing people who work on Parliament Hill, but it was a hazard, and the connection is pretty bad in terms of going back and forth. So I just wondered what the conversations are in that respect with the parliamentary precinct.
Yes, the federal departments are big stakeholders on the study. PSPC is there, who deal with the precincts and also the buildings on the south side. There are different groups in PSPC, but they're stakeholders on the study, including the NCC as well.
So is it realistic that there'd be tunnels put in that like Councillor Leeper was talking about? Is that feasible if they did go that tram route?
There on Wellington, yes, there is a pedestrian tunnel underneath Wellington near Lyon. That's the only one that's been identified for now, because that's what's needed for this transit project. If there are tunnels for other purposes, they're not within the scope of this study. And of course, on the Sparks tunnel option, it does include connections underground to our Confederation line.
So the whole object of this for STO and for us is to get more people on transit and out of cars. And out in the West End, that is a major place that people go to. I'm sure Councillor Hubley would agree with me that a lot of the traffic is going west. And I just want to make sure that that's taken into consideration in terms of the pattern of the flow of traffic, because we've got our stage 2 coming out, but we want to make sure people use it. Is that taken into consideration for where people are going? They're not all going downtown. A lot of them are going to D&D, and they're going to the high tech out in Canada. That's where a lot of people from Gatineau and Elmer are headed. So I just wanted to know if that's been taken into consideration.
If I may turn this over to Mr. Leclerc, if he can respond.
Yes, thanks for the question. All the destination points have been looked into as part of this study, and as what we're doing right now, for instance, is starting last autumn, we also increased the frequency of buses going to Tennis Pasture as well to improve the connection as well from on the kind of the west end of the city. So all the destination point, not only downtown, but they've all been considered, and they're all part of the study as well.
Okay, that's good to know, because we are working on the stage 2, and hopefully people will use it. But right now we see a lot of Quebec license plates are all headed down the Parkway, and they're all going to the West End, and it's a big part of the traffic situation. So we want to encourage them as much as possible to use transit in the future. So thank you very much.
Great, Councillor Kavanagh. Back to Councillor, if there's no further questions from other members, back to Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and love the engagement. I think there's so much opportunities that are reflected in today's comments. By no means should we take this as a setback, but I guess I see this as a meaningful outreach on engagement on ways to improve our transit for all users, that you be a resident of Ottawa or Gatineau, that you'd be that you'd be working on the Ottawa or Gatineau side. We all benefit from good integration that is efficient. Wanted to go, so I guess my questions now really relate to the report itself. Vivi, when you and I communicated, you had highlighted that the monument reflection in the report was an anomaly and was going to be corrected. I still see it stands in this report, and I wonder if that was, again, just a mistake, or if it's if there's new information that makes it relevant.
No, that shouldn't be there. It shouldn't have. There shouldn't be reference to impact on the monument at the portal end.
Okay, so just for the record, I wonder if you can work with the clerk to amend that section of the report.
I can. I thought we had taken it out, but let me review that. Thank you.
Okay. I have not, I don't know if there's anyone from OC Transpo, but as part of our City of Ottawa consultation, it is unclear to me. So daily we have OC Transpo buses that make their way across to employment nodes, specifically Chaudière and du Portage. And I guess we're silent on that impact, yet as a committee, as representative of Ottawa residents, we should be ensuring that that is our primary interest in this study. So I see Pat's image. I imagine, Pat, is it possible for you to formalize how each scenario impacts OC Transpo riders that cross onto the Gatineau side?
Certainly. Both options would improve our service for Ottawa residents who work in Gatineau currently. Those customers now transfer from the OC Transpo network or walk to downtown stops and cross into Gatineau on one of three ways. They some use the OC Transpo services that run across the Chaudière crossing. Some use the OC Transpo buses that cross the Portage Bridge, and some use the STO buses that use the Portage Bridge. With either of these two options in place, all of the bus connections from for Ottawa residents to workplaces in central, the Hull sector of Gatineau would be replaced by the light rail. So it's likely that we would no longer need to run OC Transpo buses across the Portage Bridge. It's also possible that the attraction and the ease of use of the tramway would mean that we could reduce the number of buses crossing at Chaudière. Between the two options, clearly the Spark Street alignment would make for easier connections to O Train Line 1 than the Wellington connection. So it's entirely possible that we would attract more people to transit with the Spark Street Underground alignment and the direct connections into Parliament and Lion stations than with the operation of Wellington, but the benefit is there for Ottawa residents in either case.
I think this is great information, and I wish I had read that in the report. I wonder, Pat and Vivi and our clerk, like what you just said is staff's position. Can we add that to our report? I mean, I think that story is missing for residents of Ottawa who are reading a City of Ottawa drafted report. Mr. Chair, I wonder.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Vivi. 1 second.
That could be amended going into to the brief or to council's information item.
Okay, so perhaps maybe we'll work with the city clerk on this. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. And to your point, Councillor Fleury, there'll be time as well with those additional comments. It seems like the will of this committee, a lot of people are really focused on Sparks. I know it's a concern for myself. If you could work with Caitlin, she's agreed to work with you before council, so we can work on some of those fine strokes and maybe find that direction at council.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll make 3 comments and then I have a suggestion for consideration of committee if that works. So I guess what is signed in agreement between OC Transpo and STO, and many of us know this, is the way our integration and services will be offered generally. And that exists today. It's partly in line with the LRT goals and its integration. And I guess as part of this, we're not carrying through those agreement goals, or we're not clear about them. Our goals is to improve transit, yet reduce buses in the core. That'd be an STO or OC Transpo bus. So for me, Pat and his team and John at the time worked with the previous chair, Stephen Blais, and the mayor's office to advance that agreement. And I'm not seeing it reflected through in our staff report. So again, I'll leave it there and I'll come back to how I think we should resolve this. Then the public consultation, I'm very cautious when you read the details, and there's a good consultant's report that gives you the details of what Ottawa residents versus Gatineau residents. I think there's mostly commonalities around the points, but it is an effort of STO, and unfortunately, I think the voice of Ottawa residents is not dominant. So I hope that ahead of the recommendations that we're going to see in November, that we would on our website extend the survey, maybe simplifying it to residents of Ottawa specific, so that we as representative of Ottawa residents can better inform our recommendations. And then the last one, STO might say what they want around the review of employment nodes as per Councillor Kavanagh's comments, but that's changing weekly. Shopify is closing its offices. It's not reopening. My wife and many of our spouses and family members work at the federal government. She thought she was going back in the fall. Now they've bumped that to December. The rumors in her department is that they'll like the first and foremost, people will be working from home in 2021. So things have really shifted from where we started and when STO began its conversation. Do we have to stop the investments in transit? No, but we just have to make the report and the recommendations flexible to employment nodes shifting. So, Mr. Chair, here are my 3 recommendations, or 4 recommendations, and I think they're high level enough that they would give clear direction, yet a lot of wiggle room. So, I would recommend that aligning with OC Transpo and City of Ottawa objective, that we clearly articulate our goals of less buses in the core and better transit. 2, that we be very clear on the importance of integration with our investment in light rail. 3, that we prefer underground integration to our existing stations. And then 4, that we put some element of requirement to consultation around employment areas with the Ottawa Board of Trade, with some of our large employers, including PSPC, the federal government realtor in this environment. So, Mr. Chair, I don't know how to go about. I'm glad to I've sort of written those on the side of the table here. I'm glad to formalize them. I'd love to get staff comment. I hope it doesn't. It starts to form a position, but it doesn't restrict going into to November. So, Mr. Chair, I look to you to advise me as to how to advance this. If you want me to send something formal to committee members and the clerk, I'd be glad to do that.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Fleury. And just before I wrap up on this item, is this something, first of all, I think John Manconi, are you on the line right now?
Mr. Chair, can I recommend something?
Just 1 second, Councillor. Is John online? Sorry, Eli, go ahead. We'll wait for John.
What I would suggest to my colleague who has those 3 recommendations and this report actually just to be received for information, maybe he can submit those to Vivi Chi and her team, and they can work on it with the clerk's office, see how to integrate it through the information report. I think that would be the proper way to give enough time for our staff to digest it and present it to us with the report on the council meeting.
Exactly, and that was going to be, I mentioned that prior, and I think that's probably the best recommendation, and I was hoping John would be here because it'd be great to have his feedback on it. There will be time, and as mentioned, Caitlin is committed to working with you, Councillor Fleury, so if you're good with that, oh, there's John right there. Hello, John. I'm not sure if you heard the last component of that. I think we're certainly hearing from many members of this committee. First of all, this project seems to be moving pretty fast from the STO point of view. But they really want to hone in on those 3 items, and I've heard it from many of the committee members. Would this be suffice to work with the clerk's office to be able to get some of these additional items put into the report before we actually receive it at council?
Sorry, Chair, if you could just give me a summary of what the 3 items are.
Councillor Fleury, did you want to go ahead real quickly?
Mr. Chair, yes, I'm glad to, and if this is one of the things, if we were in person, it could have been easier to share. But John, I'm glad to do that again. So we have a recommendation report in front of us, an information report in front of us. As Pat and Vivi are continuing to do great work, I want to make sure we as committee play a role in setting some of the parameters at a high level, so that in November those objectives are attained. So. I'm drafting these. I'm certainly flexible to them, but it would be something like 1, aligning with OC Transpo and City of Ottawa objectives, less buses in the core, yet better transit. 2, integration with our investment, the light rail train. 3, preferred option for the integration is underground. And then 4, mandating or requiring STO to update its employment area considerations by engaging with large employers, the Ottawa Board of Trade, and including PSPC. I'm glad to amend these if you feel that they're too specific or we need additional clarity. But as the chair highlighted, we can maybe work with the clerk ahead of this report coming to council to make this wording staff supported.
Certainly, Chair, none of those sound out of line. In fact, both you and members of your committee have talked to me about those are pretty fundamental things that we all want this project to be successful. What's important here is that, yes, STO is on a very aggressive schedule. They need this project and we're supportive of it, but we've been very, very clear with them that our community needs to have its lens applied to it. So Chair, I'm in your hands if that's the direction you want us to work. And I'm just going to ask Vivi to quickly give a quick yes or no. I believe all those are already ingrained in kind of our principles that we're doing, but if that gives the committee more comfort, absolutely. What's important in this checkpoint is that we're narrowing down on the what, which is integration, great service, all those things that both councils on both sides of the river want, and we want to get it right. And we've been very clear with STO that we're great partners. We want to work with them, but we also need to make sure that our city council and our city has comfort in the project. It is a significant project, and we need to take our time in terms of getting it right. So, Chair, I'm in your hands if you and the Vice Chair and the committee are good with that. Vivi, that's not a problem, I believe.
No, not at all. I mean, those are the principles that we are working with, but I think Councillor Fleury is asking for our staff report to be revised to reflect this. We could add a few paragraphs, but I'm fine with what's there. It's just how I'll work with the clerk's office to see how this can be rolled out for council the easiest way when the report goes to council next week.
So wonderful. So thank you very much for that. And I appreciate all the hard work. Councillor Fleury, you're good with that. You can work with the clerk's office. Great points. I'm glad you actually brought many of those up. So just as a quick wrap up on this item before we receive it, I think we've heard the will of the committee. There's a lot of concerns from multiple things, from what the location, origin, destination is, from the number of buses being reduced in our downtown area. Is it enough? So hopefully we can get some resolution as we get closer to November when a more final recommendation comes back. So thank you, committee, for your input on this item, and thank you, Councillor Fleury, for bringing that up. So on this item, is this item carried?
Received.
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 Thank you. On to the next item on the agenda. It is the installation of the safety enhancements on the Bank Street Canal Bridge. Now, we do have 3 delegations, but prior to that, if I can get Councillor Menard, he has an additional motion that goes along with this report. If you could read that, please.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. And this is a staff-supported motion on the safety enhancements of the Bank Street Bridge. Whereas the report entitled Installation of Safety Enhancements on Bank Street Canal Bridge was distributed with the Transportation Committee agenda of 3rd September 2020, and whereas the legal implications and accessibility impact sections are mandatory components of every report, and whereas since the distribution of the original report, Councillor Menard has had an opportunity to work with staff and legal services and the Corporate Accessibility Office to bolster the report's accessibility considerations, including consideration for consultations with the city's Accessibility Advisory Committee. And whereas the revised legal implications and accessibility sections attached as document 1 and 2 to this motion should be included in the report before this report rises to council. Therefore, be it resolved that Transportation Committee approve the revisions to pages 15 and 16 of that report attached to this motion as document 1 and 2, and the legal implications and accessibility implication sections, and replaced in the report to council on the 9th of September 2020.
Great. So at this point, Kelly, maybe you can assist me on, I have the delegations list in front of me here. So the first one is Michael Powell. Is Michael online?
I believe he is.
And I'll just remind members of this committee, if you can lower your hand at this point, we're just at the delegations component, and unless you have questions for the actual delegates. All right, Michael.
All right. Hey, I'm able to make this work. It feels like half my life is now spent on Zoom calls. And I appreciate being able to do this remotely. It's much easier than even in normal times. Hi, my name is Mike Powell. I am a resident of an adjacent ward, but I also am a former chair of the Roads and Cycling Advisory Committee. I wanted to speak very vociferously in favor of this motion. The Bank Street Bridge has been a challenge and a hazard for a long period of time. It's a bridge that predates road and vehicular travel and in any meaningful way, and just doesn't have enough space. If we were to put a new bridge there today, it would have space for people in all modes of transportation, be it on foot, on bikes, or buses and cars. And I think the solution here is a pretty good one. It's not perfect, obviously, but dramatically improves the situation. And what I think it does is it adds a safer way of getting across the Rideau Canal. And if you live not just in Old Ottawa South or in the Glebe, like even for me looking to get from the Dalhousie area into Carleton University, or to go to the Mayfair or Stella Luna on Bank Street, crossing the canal is a hazard, particularly when it comes to traveling with a small child. I might be comfortable on my own on a bike getting over that, but with my 5-year-old who's very confident, it's the only space where I have to mix with traffic and make a choice between her being on a sidewalk and there being a hazard, or being on the road, which is an even different one. So this is a good compromise, and I'm hope that you see fit to move it forward. And congratulations to Councillor Menard for finally shaking this one and finding something that might work.
Great. Thank you very much, Michael. I'm looking, there's no questions, but I do appreciate, it's not all the time we get positive people coming in about projects. So thank you for coming in today. Our next delegation is Barbara Greenberg. Oh, I see you there, Barbara. Hello. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Okay, I had a couple slides.
No problem. Kelly, do we have access to those? We won't start the timer till we get them up.
Don't worry, it's not speechy or anything. It's just a couple visuals.
We love visuals. We'll just take 1 second. There we go.
All right. Sorry. Let me just make my own screen smaller here. Where's the thing? There we go. Okay. Yeah, so next slide, sorry, thanks. So first of all, a great big thank you. I'm from Bike Ottawa, I'm on the board of Bike Ottawa, and we are really, really, really happy to see the installation of some multi-use paths on the bridge. And we wholeheartedly support putting them in on either side to get across the bridge. As Michael has said, the bridge has been a very problematic spot for a long time. So this is really great. And we really appreciate the flexibility that the city and staff have shown in using a maintenance project to make the bridge a safe space for active transportation users. You can go to the next slide. We definitely understand the city's position for keeping the third lane for the bus layups for events at Lansdowne and things like that. However, we would really encourage staff to rethink inserting some kind of concrete buffer to fully integrate an 880 or all ages and abilities design. The sidewalks that are to be widened for the multi-use path are really high along the bridge. And with kids and teens crossing to connect to schools, the barrier will make this very safe for everyone riding and walking alongside the buses that are going by. And we want to remind staff that in Toronto a few years ago, there was an unfortunate incident where a child of 5 years old along the waterfront path actually fell into the live driver lanes and he was killed because he was hit. So we want to encourage you to be proactive to get this right the first time. We know that the lanes are being narrowed, which is great because that's going to reduce driver speeds, but the barrier would sort of solidify that. So as a result, if you can go to the next slide, we want to encourage you to look at what the NCC did on the Portage Bridge. There, the bus lanes are 3.3 meters, the car lanes are 3.2 meters, and there's a 2.5 meter buffer that's along there. And we think that the Canal Street Bridge could use a similar design to make this an 880 design for the kids that are crossing for school. And if you go to the last slide, this is what it looks like today. So there's a bit of a barrier there, so that helps, and we've got the bus lane and everything. So this is the full-on secure way. I know that there was some talk maybe of the buffer being in the way of handlebars and things like that, but when it comes to the Portage Bridge as a user, there's no issues with that. It's just extra security for separating the active transportation user and the buses that are going by. So in conclusion, we're definitely celebrating and dancing over here about the much needed multi-use pass. And it's going to be a really important piece of the corridor there for safety. And would like to encourage you to find those few extra centimeters to put in those barriers to make it 100% great for all ages that are going to use the bridge. So thank you, and get those centimeters. They're there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I don't see any questions from any of the committee, but that being said, I'm sure when we get to the staff questions, your council will definitely raise that and see what the challenges are about what you brought up today. Our last and final delegation is Sue Nell. Is Sue online?
Yes, I am here.
Great. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the Old Ottawa South Community Association and the Traffic and Safety Committee in particular. And first, I'd like to thank, as others have done, Councillor Menard and his team for advancing the deliberations on this dangerous bridge, and hopefully something can be sorted out. The Bank Street Canal Bridge is a critical link between our community of Old Ottawa South and the Glebe and Lansdowne Park, and provides a direct route to the downtown core. Residents of Old Ottawa South are heavy users of the Bank Street Canal Bridge and therefore take a great interest in the proposed safety enhancements. In Old Ottawa South, we know the bridge and its traffic patterns well. We've been advocates for greater safety on the bridge, particularly for cyclists who, under the existing configuration, now share one northbound and one southbound lane with motorists, trucks, and buses. As noted in the report before you, because of this dangerous situation, cyclists often take to the sidewalks, thereby endangering the safety of pedestrians and themselves. The OSCA Traffic and Safety Committee believes that segregated spaces for pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles provide the safest and most sensible bridge configuration. And we're not alone. 82% of the respondents to the recent survey either strongly agreed or agreed with the statement, "I think it is important to give all road users, pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, separated space." Our preferred design is one which gives separate space to each of pedestrians, cyclists, and motor vehicles. It would see 2 lanes, one northbound and one southbound for vehicles, 2 bike lanes at the same grade as the motorized vehicle lanes, and separated raised sidewalks. This is described in alternate design number 5 in document 1 of this report. It should be noted that 66% of respondents to the survey agreed with this alternate design over the design proposed in the report. Only 32% supported the design recommended in the report. We do not agree that the proposed raised multi-use pathway on each side of the bridge for the combined use of cyclists and pedestrians is a safe option. Perhaps pedestrians and cyclists can coexist in the same space in areas where numbers of users are small, but not on busy thoroughfares like the Bank Street Bridge. Cyclists either wobble because the hill is too steep or travel too fast, especially on lengthy downhill sections, to share this space with adults with shopping bags, parents with children, seniors, people with disabilities, or residents simply out for a stroll. Also, cyclists overtaking slower cyclists will inevitably intrude into the undefined pedestrian area. We know from experience that many multi-use pathways in Ottawa that the situation can be unpleasant and unsafe for pedestrians, given the huge disparity in the speed of cyclists relative to pedestrians. We also do not agree with the lopsided solution of having 2 northbound lanes and 1 southbound lane for vehicles in order to preserve 1 northbound lane for buses waiting for spectators to exit events at TD Place. This northbound lane reserved for bus parking, perhaps 10 to 15 times a year, would prevent the city from adopting a sensible design for traffic flow on the bridge, which would be safer for all concerned. Surely this can be changed. Yes, safety enhancements to the bridge are absolutely essential, and this consideration by the Transportation Committee provides an opportunity, perhaps the only one, to get it right for many years to come. We request that the Transportation Committee direct staff to develop a design for the bridge which puts the safety of pedestrians and cyclists first. That is, one with segregated spaces for cyclists, pedestrians, and vehicles. Thank you.
Right on the money, Sue. That was good timing. Right now, I don't see any hands up. Oh, actually, Councillor Menard has his hand up. Oh, down, up, down. Okay. Do you have a question, Councillor Menard?
Well, I think Councillor Deru's had his hand up there. I don't know if he.
I don't think it was for the delegation.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just to the. Thanks, Tim. Sorry, Chair Tierney. Thanks to the delegation. Thanks very much, Sue, for coming here. Obviously there's a desire to go further than we've gone with this in terms of looking at even a 2-lane solution and segregated bike lanes. And I think, our position of what staff were recommending in terms of the options analysis that we had looked at. And that's why we ended up where we did. We're kind of all taking compromise with this. But I just wanted to say thanks for coming out with your comments. And also, I did want to make sure you did see the survey result that 87% of the over 400 participants that responded indicated that they preferred the proposed design in front of committee today rather than the current design. And I get that there's the difference of option 3, but I just want to make sure you saw that as well.
Wonderful. Sue, I'm not sure if you heard that there. Okay. So on that, I think at this point, we're going to go ahead and turn questions to staff members. Councillor Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the delegation for their input. My question will be probably to staff. Where is that 300,000 coming from water from a splash pad that we're canceling or we're not moving forward with it? And I understand. So can I have a little bit background on that?
I can provide background, Chair, if needed.
Sure, please go ahead, Councillor.
Okay, so there was a potential splash pad that was going to be installed through strategic initiative funding in Springhurst Park, but because of the soil conditions there's very difficult soil conditions there. It's an old landfill, and so it could not be installed there. And so that was moved over to strategic initiative funding and is able to be moved to this project so that we don't have any funding shortfalls in implementing this design.
Mr. Chair, thank you to you. I'll ask Councillor Menard maybe. So you're taking $300,000 from a strategic initiative that we were supposed to put a splash pad in the community. Did you ask or did you consult with that community, or because I know you like to do surveys and ask the community their input on before we move from one? And I understand and I get your initiative for the safety for cyclists, but you're really taking a splash pad from community, which is family and kids that enjoy in the summer, to put it into the safety and cycles lane. That's my I don't understand that.
No, that's fine. I can respond to it. I mean, the splash pad was determined that it couldn't go forward 2 years ago, and the community was aware of that. What we've done instead, Councillor Giroux, is there's 4 small projects that are going to be funded through our cash in lieu for Springhurst Park, which desperately needs it. They were actually supposed to go forward this year, but because of COVID-19, they've been delayed until next year, including a brand new park facility, but also ping pong tables and other workout facilities. So there is going to be an investment in that community that we've committed to, and that will continue. But certainly with regard to that, the strategic initiative funding, that wasn't going to be going forward, and was an opportunity for this project. So appreciate the question.
Well, thank you very much for answering it. Just for me, from when people's gonna hear that we're canceling a splash pad to put safety for bike lane, I rather see that you use the 300,000 from your cash and lieu for that project. But again, it's your word, and I thank you very much for the answer. I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councillor Eli Alcantara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I think I applaud Councillor Menard for that initiative because we all travel that bridge no matter where we live in the city, and we know sometimes the conflict that bridge create for safeties. And also we had to be creative this term of council. As we all know, budget restraint on us and even future project. I was also lucky last council meeting, not the one before that, but I took some money from the same thing from cash in lieu, and we switched some, and then we fixed some roads with the same amount of money. So I applaud the council for being creative and using that funding wisely for safety. So thank you. And we never thought I would say that, Sean, about you. So
Thank you, Councillor.
Wow, it's Kumbaya here. This is great. So just before I give it back to Councillor Menard for wrap up, I do want to thank Sean and all the staff. We put a tremendous amount of work in this, many hours, and looked under the seat cushions to be able to find even that money to make this program go ahead. Even with all the challenges that were also there in regards to the status of the bridge and how wide we could do things. I think, you know, is it what all cyclists want? No. Is it what all vehicle people want? No, but it's a good harmony of the two, and it's going to keep people safe. Oh, Councillor Luloff, sorry, I was calling for wrap up already, but feel free to jump in real quick there, and then we'll let.
Sorry,
Menard
Mr.
wrap it
Chair.
up.
Very quickly, sorry about that. I just want to thank Councillor Menard for coming to the rest of the members of the committee to discuss this, and also his commitment to ensure that the Accessibility Advisory Committee is consulted on this item. We really appreciate that, Sean, and thanks so much for that initiative.
Great. So thank you, Sean. Did you want to do a quick wrap up, and then we'll call for the vote?
I just wanted to thank staff and all the residents who replied. Staff have been great throughout this in terms of finding different options. We looked at about 7 different options, and this was the one that came to the fore that could work. The many others couldn't for a lack of space on the bridge. It's really tight there. And so I think we're going to get a big improvement here. It's going to be a larger than usual multi-use path at 3.2 meters. So it's going to be, I think, a big improvement for not just residents in this area, but anyone who's attending Lansdowne events. You know how crushed you are on that bridge after you leave a Lansdowne event, but also people that are coming into this area. It's a big tourist area. A lot of folks use this bridge on a regular basis, whether you're driving, biking, walking, rolling. And so I just want to thank yourself as well, Chair, for your support, and Vice Chair for your support, and appreciate rest of committee's support on this.
All right, so on this item, is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you very much. That's unanimous.
Chair.
Yes.
On the motion and then as amended.
So on the motion, is this item carried?
Carried.
And as amended?
Carried.
Thanks for keeping me in line, Kelly. All right. We'll move down to the last item on the agenda, I believe, is the, yes, it's the sidewalks that we passed the motion to add to the agenda. Councillor Fleury, did you want to ask your questions now?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to begin by thanking Karina and her entire team. They do great work day in, day out, and they're sensitive to our community needs. We all have various infrastructure projects. Want to begin by that. The city, in its diligent in the past, has reviewed our sidewalk and engaged accessibility advisory committees throughout. With the standards that were approved, what's often called the Ottawa style and Toronto style sidewalks, we've seen newer challenges, especially in urban areas with the frequency of driveways, with limited right-of-ways where you might have hydro poles, where you might have retaining walls, where you might have limited space. The comments we've received in those areas relate to other means of accessibility. So we've heard from elderly couples not able to walk side by side on our new sidewalks, dog walkers who trip up, who they, we've heard of winter issues. We've heard of various challenges as it relates to that. So I've engaged with staff on the matter, and maybe don't have questions at this point, but maybe just understand clearer the Karina's intentions as part of the standards review.
Great, we'll just give a second there for Karina to come online.
So here I am. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for your questions. So you and I talk a lot about sidewalks lately. So we understand the concerns that yourself and other members of council or community have raised in regard to the sidewalk standards we have today. We are committed to do a full review of the sidewalk standards in the 2020-2021 standards review. So it was not part of our plan, but enough concerns were raised that trigger us to pay specific attention to this and agree to move ahead with a full review of the standards we have today. The other piece that I like to comment on is while we do some sort of community consultation on some of our standards, it's not the practice we use for the majority of them. But given the fact that the users are our community and they're very sensitive to this, we are going to include as part of our standards review and outreach and community consultation citywide to get feedback from everybody that would like to provide that feedback and be able to collect that information as part of the input that we are going to take into consideration on the review. So you have my commitment that our service will do a full stamp review of the standards. Where we're going to land, I don't know. But we will include heavy community consultation, of course, all internal services and departments that are touched by sidewalks, either maintenance, operations, or anything else.
Mr. Chair, I just want to again highlight it's rare that the engagement between a community or a councillor rise to committee, but I believe that the inquiry raised a bunch of points and want to highlight how diligent our staff is. It's rare that the community and the media get to see how engaged our team is, and certainly Karina here is a great example of that, and certainly the team with her as well. So thank you, Karina, for clarifying the approach and for responding to community concerns in this regard.
You're welcome, Councillor. Thank you.
And I don't see hands up. I just want to echo exactly, Councillor Fleury. Thank you for your hard work. And as we talk about sidewalks, we all talk about the former amalgamated cities. In Gloucester, I don't even have sidewalks in areas, so it's always a concern for sure. So thank you very much on that. So since this, do we receive this inquiry? Is this item received?
Received.
Great, thank you very much. And I'm just going to give me 1 second. All right, flip over to back to the agenda. So I guess we're going on to inquiries, and we have an inquiry, and maybe we can get it put up on the screen. It says Councillor Fleury, but is Councillor Egley online? Maybe Matt is actually going to read it out there.
I don't have.
I am online, Mr. Chair.
Oh, perfect. Councillor, did you want to go ahead and read your inquiry? And it's
Sure,
very well timed.
If you can get put on the screen, perhaps.
I didn't receive a copy of it.
Oh, we sent it yesterday, so I apologize for that. Give me 1 second, Chair, and I will find it.
Kelly, you should have received it. Councillor Egley shared it with you and I yesterday at 11:18, if that is of any help.
And while we wait for that to be on the screen, do you have a copy of it there, Keith? Maybe you can just read it out.
Well, I'm just pulling that up.
Oh, okay.
As you know, Tim, me and technology don't always get along. So I've got one screen going and I'm looking at the other screen. So just give me 1 second.
Not a problem. And your inquiry are two topics that I don't like at all. So snow and COVID.
Oh, no, that's where I said I was going to send it to Matt. Well, as we look, I'll explain what it is in any event. So,
well, Matt has it. Matt can read it, and then you can give.
Yeah, you read it. I'll provide the background. Perfect. Thank you, Matt.
Team effort here. So the subject is snow plowing and removal 2020-2021. The inquiry is the following, and this is, I'm reading it on behalf of Egley. In light of the impending winter and the likelihood that COVID-2019 will still be very much an issue that the city will be dealing with, taking into account that many people will continue to work from home during this time, please provide the following to council in a timely fashion so that Ottawa residents can know what to expect with regards to snow removal protocols and practices. 1, what is the plan for snow plowing and removal to make sure that sidewalks, multi-use pathways throughout the city are kept clear and accessible, as they will likely be used more by people working from home and get children to and from school? 2, what is the plan to allow the regular snow plowing and removal in light of the fact that more cars will likely be parked on the street all day long as people continue to work from home? 3, what is expected of residents to allow for timely and efficient snow plowing and removal? 4, will parking bans still be utilized for plowing and removal? And if so, how will they be modified to address more cars on the street as a result of more people working from home? And 5, how and when will these plans or modifications to snow plowing and removal be communicated to the public?
Thank you very much, Councillor Fleury. And just very briefly, Mr. Chair, thank you as well. We talked about this over the last day or so. So this inquiry comes out of a number of discussions that I've had with residents who have said to me, you know what, kids, I'm going to be working from home. Kids are going to start to go back to school. My husband's working from home as well. So we have multiple cars. We need the roads clear so we can get, you know, our children to and from school safety, either on foot or by driving them. And so we'd like to know what's coming down the road, so to speak, in terms of how the city might be addressing that, and more importantly, what the expectations of the city are going to be on residents. So I'm bringing in September while the weather is still reasonably good, but just the more information that people have, they can make arrangements, whether that's parking arrangements elsewhere, sharing driveways with neighbors, what have you, so that they can adjust to what we're calling the new normal as we enter into winter. I suspect, Mr. Chair, from previously sitting in your chair and wearing that hat, that the team has already considered this and probably has been considering this for some time, and has are formulating options and plans. I just think the sooner we can get that information out to the public so they know what's expected of them, and how they can work with us to make it work as well as possible. Again, in light of the fact that we'll probably have more people full-time in our communities than we normally do this coming winter. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Keith. And you must have been a fly on the wall in one of our meetings, because we were having a discussion similar to this. So I've already confirmed that we'll definitely be able to respond to your inquiry by the next one, because some planning has already gone ahead on some of these items, but a very good point, and thank you for raising it today. So as we move on to the final item, there is we do actually have a notice of motion. And at this point, if we can get that up on the screen, Kelly, we'll get to, I think it's Councillor Luloff. Deputy Mayor Luloff is reading this one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So whereas the Strandherd Drive widening is presently under construction between Mara Vista Drive and Jockvale Road, whereas the short 100-meter distance between McKenna-Casey Drive intersection with Strandherd Drive and the railway crossing presents traffic safety concerns during construction, and the closure of McKenna-Casey Drive is required, whereas Strandherd Drive will be constructed on a bridge structure crossing over the railway crossing, and McKenna-Casey Drive needs to be permanently closed following construction, as the short distance between the railway crossing and the intersection with McKenna-Casey Drive is insufficient to clear the height differential, whereas McKenna-Casey Drive provides an alternate east-west route crossing Highway 416, connecting Moody Drive to the Barhaven community, with traffic volumes increasing annually, and the closure of McKenna-Casey Drive would require a detour adding 5.3 kilometers travel distance and 7 to 10 minutes travel time through a series of 7 signalized intersections from Moody Drive at Fallowfield to Strandherd Drive at Car Dealership Way. Whereas the widening of Strandherd Drive needs to mitigate the closure of McKenna-Casey Drive by completing an amendment to the Strandherd Drive environmental assessment study to identify a realignment of McKenna-Casey Drive. If we can get the clerk to move this guy up. Oh my goodness. Whereas funding for the amendment to the environmental assessment study and for the design is available in the Strandherd Drive widening construction project, whereas the planned development is occurring bordering McKenna-Casey Drive and Strandherd Drive, and there is an opportunity to realign McKenna-Casey Drive and integrate it as part of a planned development, and whereas the Transportation Master Plan identifies McKenna-Casey Drive east of the 416 as a major collector, realigned to connect to Strandherd Drive. Therefore, be it resolved that Transportation Committee direct Transportation Services Department and Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development staff to complete an addendum to the Strandherd Drive widening environmental assessment to study the McKenna-Casey realignment as well as complete preliminary and detailed design using the existing Strandherd Drive widening construction budget.
Can you read that again one more time, please?
Yeah, sure. If you can just scroll that right back to the top, Mr. Chair.
Skipper's breath there. So.
All right. So that's just a notice of motion, and thank you for doing that for Chair Harder, actually. So we're at the fun point of the meeting where there's no other business and adjournment. Does that carry?
Yeah.
Thank you for a very successful meeting today, everybody. And we'll see you again on October 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.